Welcome to this session from Benjamin Franklin House. I'm Eleanor Hamblin, the Education Manager at the Museum. Today we're going to be learning about the life of Benjamin Franklin and how he was able to change the world with his words. By the end of the session, you're going to have a go at writing persuasively to help change the world for the better. The session should take from 45 minutes to an hour. There are 2 activities to complete, and I will explain what materials you will need for these when we get there. The first activity is an art and design-based task, but still thinking about language, and the second activity is a writing task. If at any point you need to pause the presentation to take a break or think about your answer to a question, just press the pause button, and when you want to resume, press the play button. Okay. Let's get started. Before I tell you more about Benjamin Franklin, what he was doing in London, and how he changed the world with his writing, I've got some questions to get you thinking. You may want to pause the video after each one to give you time to think, or if you're watching this with someone else, to talk to them about it. Have you ever been to this building, or perhaps walked past it? When do you think it might have been built? Are there any clues in the architecture? What do you know about Benjamin Franklin? Do you recognize the man in this painting? Why do you think we still learn about him today? What important things might he have done? Let's find out more. To answer the question, who was Benjamin Franklin? Let's start by going back to the beginning of his life. Ben Franklin was born in 1706 in Boston, in America. You can see a picture of Boston at the top on the right. This was painted quite a few years after Ben was born, but he would have known many of the buildings shown here, like the old State House, which is the yellow building in the middle. Ben had 16 brothers and sisters, if you can imagine that, and so his parents could only afford to send him to school for 2 years. Even though he didn't have a lot of formal education, this didn't stop Ben becoming a lifelong learner, and he loved books. When he left school, Ben started working for his father, who was a tallow chandler, which meant he makes soap and candlesticks. But before long, he went on to work for his older brother James, who was a printer. At that time, you had to use a printing press to print newspapers and books, which is what you can see a young Ben Franklin doing in the picture on the bottom right. Ben was very good at printing, but he didn't always get along so well with his brother. In 1723, he left for Philadelphia so that he could write and print his own books and newspapers. Now let's hear why Ben Franklin went to London. As well as printing and writing, Franklin had other important jobs. He was a scientist who created many inventions to help people, including the lightning rod to protect buildings from lightning strikes. I wonder if you've heard of any of his other inventions. He was also a politician and came to live in London in 1757 to try to settle disagreements between America and England. At that time, America was part of England and not yet an independent country. However, after 16 years in England, it became clear that the government wasn't going to listen to Franklin's arguments. He left in 1775 as the War of Independence was beginning, when America fought to become independent and decide its own laws. Franklin is remembered as one of the founding fathers of the United States for the crucial role he played. The picture on the top left of the screen is a portrait of Benjamin Franklin, painted during the years he lived in London. The picture at the bottom on the left is a view of the River Thames in London at that time. This was not far from the house Ben lived in on Craven Street, that we now call Benjamin Franklin House. You might have noticed that there weren't as many bridges or tall buildings as there are in London today. We've heard more about Ben Franklin who he was and what he was doing in London. So let's find out now how he used words to change things. Although Benjamin Franklin went on to have lots of other jobs, his printing press remained very important. Franklin could influence lots of people by publishing his ideas in pamphlets, newspapers, and books. In the 18th century, the only way people could get news was by reading it or hearing it from someone else. Let's think more about the role of the printing press at this time. A printing press was a machine which used ink to transfer words and images to paper. You can see one in the picture on the right. As well as writing persuasively, Franklin used powerful images to spread his ideas. He printed this famous image of a snake in his newspaper in 1754 to encourage the original 13 colonies, which would later become the states, in America to work together. Bold images and memorable slogans are still an effective way of spreading ideas. Today, campaigners harness the power of the internet to share these with millions in an instant. Use Activity Sheet 1, which you should be able to download where you found this video, to create your own printed message about an issue you care about, such as bullying or climate change. I'm going to take you through how to complete the activity. Activity 1. Design and print a persuasive slogan. Once you've chosen an important issue, think of an image and phrase which will encourage people to change their behaviour. You may want to draw your design on paper before turning it into a print, using the instructions below. First of all, you're going to need a styrofoam pizza base. This is the white disc that usually comes under pizzas when you buy them from the supermarket. Scissors, a sharp pencil or biro pen, poster paint, or you could use another sort of paint like acrylic, a piece of cardboard, this can be recycled from an old box, a roller, or if you don't have one, a paintbrush, newspaper or scrap paper, and plain paper to make your print on. If you don't have some of these materials, you can always spend longer on the design stage of your slogan, using pens and paper. To make the print, you'll need to follow these steps. First, put newspaper and scrap paper down to protect your work surface. Then cut your styrofoam into the shape and size you prefer, so you may want it to be a square or a rectangle or any shape you want. Use your pencil or pen to draw on your design. You need to press a little bit hard, but must take care not to push through the styrofoam and make a hole. You'll need to write any words backwards, like you can see in the example above. Then use your cardboard as a palette and put some paint on it, and cover your design in paint using either your roller or your paintbrush. Then place the painted side of your design down on a piece of paper and press it firmly. Finally, peel back the styrofoam and admire your print. You should now pause the video to complete the activity. There were lots of important issues which Ben Franklin cared about, and one of these was the abolition of slavery. This meant bringing an end to slavery by making it illegal to buy and sell slaves. Although Benjamin Franklin did not oppose slavery as a young man and even owned slaves, he would become a passionate supporter of abolition. In the last years of his life, he wrote articles, made speeches, and petitioned the American government, which means he wrote to them asking them to do things, to bring an end to slavery, which he described as an atrocious debasement of human nature. He also circulated medallions with Josiah Wedgwood's famous anti-slavery image. This is the picture you can see in the small circle on the right. He wrote to his British friend Wedgwood, saying, "I am persuaded the medallion may have an effect equal to that of the best written pamphlet in procuring favour to those oppressed people." If you've ever heard the phrase, "a picture is worth 1,000 words," that's a bit like what Ben Franklin's saying here. Although slavery wasn't abolished until much later, 1833 in England, and 1865 in America, the actions of Benjamin Franklin and many others paved the way for this process. Franklin therefore used images as well as the written and spoken word to spread his ideas and try to change the world for the better. Soon I'm going to be handing over to you to change the world with your writing. We're going to write a newspaper article like the one you can see on the screen. While newspapers are no longer our only written source of news, as they were in the 18th century when Ben Franklin was alive, they are still read by millions worldwide. Most of the articles featured in newspapers are factual and describe events as they happened. However, some articles express opinions on important issues facing the world today, and this is the style of writing we're going to practice. Can you remember what features you need to include in a newspaper article? Pause the video to see if you can name some of them. Okay, let's recap. First, let's look at the structural features, so how you'll want to lay out your article. You should start with a headline that should grab the reader's attention. Next, you'll want an orientation, which should summarize what the article is about and is normally just one sentence. Then you can move on to the main body of your article, which should be written in paragraphs and may include some quotations. You may want to include an image to illustrate the article, and this should have a caption explaining the image. You may want to pause the video now to have a read of this example before we move on. Now let's look at the language features. Since we're writing an opinion piece for our newspaper article and are trying to convince our readers that they need to act or think differently, we will want to use persuasive writing techniques. Here are some features to try and include and examples of how you could use them to talk about climate change. Personal pronouns. This is where you use words like we to create a sense of shared responsibility. An example would be, we must act now to halt climate change. Emotive language. This is language which makes your reader feel strong emotions and empathise with your subject. An example would be, the ice caps are melting, which is robbing animals of their habitat. Rhetorical questions. These are questions you're not really looking for an answer to, but are meant to get your reader thinking. An example would be, how would you feel if your future was snatched away from you? Statistics and facts. These usually include numbers. An example would be, Antarctica lost 127 billion tons of ice per year between 1993 and 2016. Use of an authority figure. An authority figure could be a scientist or a known organisation. In my example here, I've used NASA, which is the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in America. According to NASA, 97% of climate scientists agree that climate warming trends over the past century are very likely due to human activities. Alliteration and anecdotes. Alliteration is when several words start with the same sound, like furious forest fires. And an anecdote is when you tell a story about something which has happened. An anecdote might start, when the Prime Minister announced. Description and imagery. This is where you use words to create a picture in your reader's head. An example would be, walls of water force their way into shops and homes. I've used a metaphor here because I'm describing water as something else, as a wall. Exaggeration. This is where you overstate what is happening or how quickly it's likely to happen. An example would be, if we don't act, the end of civilization as we know it is imminent. Repetition in groups of 3. Although we don't want to include too much repetition in our writing, sometimes it can be really effective, especially if you use it in groups of 3. An example would be, governments must think of our children, our children's children, and our children's children's children when they make decisions about climate change. If you look at the first letters of these words, they spell out persuader. We call this a mnemonic, and we can use it to help us remember the features of persuasive writing. So it was P for personal pronouns, E for emotive language, R for rhetorical questions, S for statistics and facts, U for use of an authority figure, A for alliteration and anecdotes, D for description and imagery, E for exaggeration, and R for repetition and groups of 3. So, the time has come for you to be like Ben Franklin and change the world. It's your turn to stand up for what you believe in and make a difference with your writing. Here's what you need to do to make your voice heard. First, choose an issue you care about, such as bullying, climate change, or something which is affecting your local community. Then use Activity Sheet 2, which you should be able to download where you found this video, to plan and write a newspaper article to convince others to act now. I'm going to take you through how to complete this activity. We're going to plan and write your newspaper article about the important issue you've chosen. If you have a printer, you can print out the planning and writing templates on Activity Sheet 2. Don't worry if you don't have a printer, you can use the templates as a guide to write your plan and newspaper article on plain or lined paper. You'll want to write your plan in note form, so using bullet points, and this should take about 5 to 10 minutes. Then your newspaper article should be in full sentences and will probably take about 20 to 30 minutes. In your plan, you should start with your headline. Remember, this needs to grab the reader's attention, so you may want to use some alliteration. Next, plan your orientation, which is a summary of your argument, and so you're stating the most important thing you want to say. Moving on to paragraph 1, where you'll need to introduce your argument. You might want to start this with a rhetorical question. In paragraph 2, you'll expand your argument, so this is where you might want to include statistics, anecdotes, and expert opinions. And in paragraph 3, you'll need to conclude your argument, so this might be the place you'll use personal pronouns to explain what to do next. Remember, you can use the persuasive word bank at the bottom to help you with your plan. Then you should start writing your newspaper article using the structure of your plan, but writing in full sentences. You may want to include a picture with a caption to illustrate your article. You can pause the video now as you start writing. Good luck! Well done, and thank you for taking part in this Changing the World session from Benjamin Franklin House. If you'd like to use more of our learning resources, please visit our website at www.benjaminfranklinhouse.org. And if you'd like to get in touch with any questions or to share the work you've created after this session, you can email education@benjaminfranklinhouse.org.